Welcome to Energy and Water, Greater Copenhagen Living Lab. We underpin the City of Copenhagen's goal to become a living lab and showroom for sustainable city solutions. And we do that by showcasing, by educating, and by co-designing with citizens on green utility. In that sense, we look at CO2 neutrality, we look at the green and blue infrastructure in the city, and we look at educating the next environmental and sustainable generation here. When we work with sustainable cities, we work on 3 different levels. So we look at the surface level, which is a lot of the physical infrastructure that we see in our city, but it's also the citizens and the politicians and everything else that goes on here within the green and blue infrastructure. Then we look at the utility that we have, so what's beneath the surface of our cities and how does that connect to each other. Finally, we look at the smart city thinking that we have in our cities. So how can we optimize our cities to become more sustainable? So that is the whole picture that we work with here at Energy and Water. And now we would like to show you also what our living lab activities within these areas, they actually look like. Here at Energy and Water, we work with the definition of a living lab made by the European Network of Living Labs. That means we see ourselves as innovation intermediaries, and we work with a multitude of different stakeholders. We deliver services in public, private, people partnerships, and we do this ultimately to create social value. In Greater Copenhagen, there is a lot of different living labs. Greater Copenhagen is a great place to have a living lab because on one hand, the area is large enough for climate solutions to be valuable also on an international level. At the same time, Greater Copenhagen is small enough that when we want to test and implement these climate solutions, it can be done in quite a manageable way. So these different living labs that are mentioned here, they also work with utility and climate solutions, just as we do, but there is a difference in the way that we do it. Some of them will be business living labs. Some living labs are research-based. Here at Energy and Water, we see ourselves as both an educational living lab, but also a collaborative living lab. But what is it actually that we do down in like the small activities that we have here? So to showcase that, we work with this model here. So this model shows our mission statement in the middle and is surrounded by 4 fundamental areas that we work with. So for example, one of the areas is our personal foundation regarding sustainable city development. Another fundamental area that we work with is kind of our tools and methods, so pedagogical approaches, tools and methods for sustainable city development. The third area, fundamental areas that we work with is the co-creation of sustainable city solutions. So that is kind of our focus, while the fourth area is kind of our overall goal with our living lab, and that is to create sustainable cities. Each of these areas, they can expand into 4 new areas on their own. So for example, here, the pedagogical approaches, tools and methods expands into 4 areas that kind of show a direction that we want to work with. So here we can work with our pre-existing educational thinking. We can work with a sort of curriculum for educating on the sustainable city. We want to work with how to create didactics for sustainable city education. And ultimately, we want to reach a place where we can actually create sustainable city education services. So that's sort of the direction we want to go in on this fundamental area that we work with. These 16 areas can actually also expand into 4 areas each of their own, making 64 focus areas for us to work with. And each of these 64 focus areas are actually quite concrete and something that we can work with in our daily work. So with this area here, we can just click on one of the focus areas. This is pedagogical co-design thinking. And that's actually something that we can work with in order to work with our mission statement as a whole. And to work with these focus areas, we utilize a sort of living lab toolbox. So this toolbox contains a variety of methods that we can take into use in each of our activities. Such toolbox or methods might be data acquisition or visualization, might be design thinking or evaluation. So there's a lot of different methods that we can actually pull into our daily work. And we use these methods ultimately to try and connect people in our projects. So when we do projects and activities, there will be subjective elements and there will be objective elements to everything we do. So objective elements might be the economy or the planning or the structure or the organization of a project, while the subjective elements will be the feelings that people have, or prejudices, or values, or how they perceive different types of technology. And for these two spheres to meet, we need to bridge with different methods to make people talk and reach the same level of understanding. So these are some of the methods that we use in our daily work. Another thing, besides our toolbox, is also that we have a row of demands for ourselves when we work as a living lab. So what I just described here was this kind of multi-method approach that we always use a range of different methods in our work. Another demand is that we always use co-creation and that we have a multi-stakeholder participation. So we try and include as many stakeholders as possible, ultimately to create the greatest change that we can. Then we always have an element of user engagement, while all our projects and activities need to be involved in like a real life setting, so have a real life scope. From our toolbox and the different demands that we have that we pull into our projects, we also try overall to work on 3 different levels. This is a micro, meso, and macro level. So the micro level is also what we call a user level. This is our single activities or single projects that we have. On a meso level, we try and create something a little bit bigger than that. So it's also called a technology level. So how can we create a kind of platform that a lot of different activities can be tied up to? Finally, on the macro level is where we see some kind of systemic change. So how can our projects or activities actually create wider change in our society, for example, or with our partners, or maybe outside of Greater Copenhagen? So these 3 levels are always involved when we do different projects, but also in energy and water just as a living lab in itself. So that is our take on the living lab thinking. So we are a collaborative and educational living lab. We work with 64 different focus areas that we can use to use within our mission statement. We use multiple methods every time we do anything, and we work with stakeholder participation and this co-designing process. And we do all of this on 3 different levels, both in our activities and in all the projects that we do. So that was sort of a short run through of our living lab methods and how we work in our daily work. Now we'd really like to show you a case of how we brought in these methods in an actual project.
In the future, the city of Copenhagen will experience even more heavy rain. To accommodate these large amounts of water, we must adapt our cities to lead the water from the city into the harbor in a safe way. Traditionally, this has been done through pipes below the surface. But with the increasing amounts of water, we must now use the surface to accommodate all of this water. This creates a clash, because we used to have engineers working with pipes and urban planners working with spaces. Now these two have to create a new urban image that accommodates both sustainability, livability, and water management. Therefore, the politicians of Copenhagen has decided that public involvement and participatory processes is of the uttermost importance, because if we want to make a more livable city, we need to include everyone in the city. This is the largest transformation in the city's history, both financially and physical. So we are at a key point in time where the decisions we make now will influence the city many decades into the future. Knowing this, the politicians decided that we should work with both grey, green and blue solutions. And most important of all, we must include the citizens, since it is their city. All of this to ensure a more livable and attractive city in the future. This transformation goes from the city level down to the neighborhood level, and therefore it's important to include the citizens at the local level. To do this, we created a participatory planning process that is both tangible and educational for the citizens, but also realistic and efficient regarding the solution that we want to implement. On the micro level, we created the climate adaptation plan needed. On the meso level, we created a platform that accommodates all of the needs from participatory planning to technical aspects. And on the macro level, we made the understanding of climate adaptation visible within the utility companies and the municipalities, so planners realized that they might not perceive climate adaptation as the same thing. Now you will see a movie that takes you to the entire process that we did with the Homeowner Association, from the encounter we had at the beginning to the climate adaptation plan that were the final product. Our work aimed to create a climate adaptation plan for a local homeowners association in collaboration with the citizens. Our project was centered around an online platform. Each local community had its own site with relevant information. Here they can find an overview of the entire process with information on what is happening and when. Citizens participated in everything from data collection to data analysis. This ensured a greater understanding of all of the technical aspects. Technical aspects were disseminated through interactive maps. For example, see how the water flows, and use the spyglass to investigate the surface below the water flows. Investigate imperviousness and peel off the earth to check for unwanted pipes that could interfere with construction. This allows for full transparency in creating proposals. When the screening is complete, solutions can be identified by browsing through the pre-approved catalog. Here the citizens can investigate properties on each solution, including pros and cons. Afterwards, citizens can see the solution in real life and understand it better. The selected solutions are now added to a 3D model of the area. Citizens can investigate the entire model from the comfort of their own home. This could be checking for unwanted shadow cast on a newly built patio. In this instance, the neighbors actually identified the problem and the solution by themselves, with no need or assistance from the project manager. If someone missed a meeting, they could always follow the latest ideas on the interactive maps. Here they could open each solution and read pros and cons and how it affected the entire area. Summing up, the entire process is co-creative and democratic, visual and applied, and inclusive for all ages.